bringing to you series number 3 today, which is the beginner's guide on guppies and their guppy care. Hi, welcome back. The article that I'm about to bring to you at this time is going to be from the International Fancy Guppy Association. This is public information. It is published on the internet as free information for your downloading. So I'm not going to read this article word for word, but I'm going to go over some of the highlights of Beginner's Guide for Guppy Breeding, and also want to reiterate the fact that this is free information. Anybody can go to the website and print this document as well. So this is the Beginner's Guide by the International Fancy Guppy Association, and it is dedicated to the fancy guppy hobby. Beginner's Guide. It gives you an introduction and a welcome to let you know that this site is provided to help those new to the fancy guppy hobby. It's not intended to be a complete guide to the care and propagation of guppies. It is, however, intended to give the beginner a start in the right direction. And so I want to also do the same thing. Every time I read this article, I see something new. I get reminded of something I forgot that I'm not doing correctly, or that's why I'm having problems because I didn't follow these little simple guidelines. But anyway, we're going to start with tanks. Beginners in this hobby a lot of times are discouraged to hear about breeders with very elaborate fish rooms. We're intimidated by the number of tanks that they have. Some of them have up to 200 tanks just for one strain. And so we're like, oh, I don't even want to get started. But you don't have to start with 200 tanks. And they didn't either. They built up to that point. But that is a serious breeder. And he probably competes in competition, and he also mass produces them and sells them to international wholesalers, etc. You do not need an elaborate setup to raise good guppies. A bare 10-gallon tank is very practical. It all depends on the room that's available, remember that, and your budget. For example, some breeders use 10-gallon tanks to grow babies and 20s for your showfish. Breeding trios are housed in 2 to 5-gallon tanks. In order to achieve a success in raising good show guppies, one needs to have a minimum of 8 to 10 tanks per strain. And that's a minimum. And it'll be, it's explained in some of the booklets why you need so many. Because by the time you separate males from females, then you do your breeding with mother and son, you're breeding with father and daughter, and then their fries, and you separate those fry, and then you do siblings, brother to sister, sometimes cousins, are close siblings. There's different ways to perfect that strain. By the time you get to the 3rd and 4th generations, you should be producing duplicates of the parents. But that's not always true. In order to accomplish this, you will have to do some serious culling. Just think, each female drops 30 to 50 babies every 28 to 30 days. And when we talk about culling the fry, it's not from birth defects. We don't cull them to kill them or euthanize them. A breeder will cull his fish, keep the best that he wants to see the traits reproduced, and the culls go to local fish stores, or you sell them or you give them away. You don't have to euthanize. Culling does not mean euthanize. It means you are being selective and breeding and producing the traits in your strains that you want to see. So I always encourage you to have a backup plan. Don't just keep one breeding trio. I would do 2 to 3 breeding trios of the same strain and then cull from their fry and go from there. Remember that each female will produce 30 to 50 fry, and mine have been smaller because in the small community tanks that I have them in, they might be dropping 15 and 20 and eating some of them, and so we're having 7 survive, 5 survive, 3 survive, so I'm working on that. I have plenty of grass in there. They just get hungry. So if you kept all these offspring and the numbers of fish grows geometrically, soon enough 200 tanks would not even be enough. Okay, so that's enough on tanks. Let's go to filtration. 2 types that most breeders use are the box filters and the sponge filters. If you do a hang on the back filter, you have to have a sponge on the intake to keep from sucking up the fry. It says that these filters should be, if you use a mechanical filter like the hang on the back filter, they should be filled with floss and use dolomite or marbles for weight. And the sponge filter is the easiest to maintain, and it's one of the favorites among the breeders. And it's a simple filter sponge with an airlift tube run by an air pump. Most of us know all that. The sponge holds millions of bacterial organisms that help clean and purify the water, and either type of filter must be cleaned at least every other week. So I'm not doing that, but I will pick up on my cleaning of my filter. And to do this, you don't wash it under tap water. You do a water change, and then you clean the filter in that dirty water that you extracted from your tank. You just squeeze it out. You don't rinse it under the tap. You just squeeze it out, and then you put it back in the tank, hook it back up to the air hose, and you're ready to go. So about every other week, so every 2 weeks, you want to clean your filters. If you use air pumps, the amount of air that you need will depend on the number of tanks that you set up. And of course, a good vibrator pump will handle 10 to 15 tanks with no problem. And if you have a large fish room, they said it's easy to hook it up to PVC pipe and have individual air lines coming from that pipe to each tank. They say that system is easy to install and can probably use a smaller pump than if you run all of your air through flexible tubing. So I haven't yet set that up. I've thought about it, but I haven't planned it out. Lighting. If you have a lot of tanks, it's best to use 4-foot fluorescent ceiling lights rather than try to light each tank. In this room, I have 2 10-gallon tanks behind me that have individual tank lids with lights. I have 3 5-gallon tanks, and each one of those have individual lids with lights. So here in this office, I don't need ceiling shop lights or anything like that. But downstairs, I have 2 20-gallon tanks with individual lids with lights. I have a 55-gallon tank with an individual 48-inch fluorescent light, and also my 25-gallon, I have an individual lid with light as well. No, I just have the light on it. I don't have a lid on it. So in this article, it says that it is best to use a 4-foot fluorescent ceiling light rather than trying to light each tank. And the light should be kept on. Now listen to this. The light should be kept on 10 to 14 hours a day. Lights should be set to go on 1 hour before feeding and 1 hour after your last feeding. 10 to 14 hours a day. And that produces great lighting for good strong backs. It also stimulates growth in your fish, and it will provide adequate lighting for any plants that you have in there for exchange of gases, carbon dioxide and oxygen. All right, the next point that I want to get to is water. And we'll probably end with that today. Good clean water is the most important element for growing large guppies and long flowing fins. And we also know that good clean water in this hobby of fish keeping, whether it's guppies or any other strain or species of fish or invertebrates or anything else that you keep, clean water is the most important element in the care of your fish. Here it encourages you to call your local water company to find out about the chloramines, which is a combination of chlorine and ammonia, and how much of it is being added to your tap water. And we all know that chloramine and chlorine are lethal to tropical fish. We all know to use a commercial product to treat our tap water if we do have these chemicals in our tap water. I use API stress coat. Many use prime, and a powdered solution of prime is called Safe. But there are other products out there. There's Tetra products, AquaSafe, and there's just many different products out there. You pick what is good for you, what works for you, and continue on. This chemical will separate the chloramine from the ammonia, and it eliminates it, leaving only the ammonia. The ammonia can then be removed by running a box filter with ammo chips in your water holding vessel. And what I had to do with one of my breeding tanks, because I keep having an ammonia level in it, I think the cycle crashed, the beneficial bacteria, something happened to it, and it crashed, and so now it's going through a mini cycle. So I added some ammo carb into a little sock, and well, it's not a sock, but it's a media bag. Rinsed it under the water, and I put it in the aquarium under the regular filter. And hopefully that will take charge of some of the ammonia and the mini cycle that's going on. I also added stress zyme, which was beneficial bacteria, to the tank. All right. If you just have chlorine in your water, you can age it for about 24 hours with aeration. Now, I've heard that process. So if you just have chlorine, what I've done before is, I'll put my water in a 5-gallon bucket, leave the lid off, put an aerator airline in it, run an air pump to it, and aerate it for 24 hours, and that will evaporate off the chlorine. A simple test kit is very useful to monitor this procedure. Hardness and pH are not critical as long as they do not suddenly vary over a wide range. Hardness in tap water from 20 to 400 ppm total hardness, depending on the origin of the water supply. Guppies seem to do better in the water on the hard side. With regards to the pH, guppies can handle anything from 6.8 to 7.8, but 7.0 is ideal. Ammonia, the #1 fish killer, is caused by overcrowding, overfeeding, poor water conditions, or lack of oxygen in the water. So I just answered my own question. But I also realized when I rinsed the filter off the last time, that's when I had a spike in ammonia. I lost my male, and of course when fish body starts decaying, that immediately starts increasing ammonia in the water also. So I did 2 water changes yesterday. I tested the ammonia again this morning. It's still high, so I added the ammocarb to the filter, and I'll be checking it in a couple hours. It's especially important to monitor the ammonia level in new setups. The good nutrifying bacteria will eliminate ammonia, and it will take from 2 to 3 weeks to develop. If you find ammonia present, do water changes with your seasoned water as required. Usually about 20 to 30% will suffice. So I did a 50% and then another 50% yesterday. And I still am showing some slight ammonia this morning. Another option is to run a box filter with ammo chips in the affected tank. So that's what I did. I added the ammocarb to the filtration on the hang on the back. Well, it's not really hang on the back, it's an internal filter. Remember, try to avoid sudden changes in pH and hardness. Guppies can acclimate to a wide variety of changes, and if they're done slowly. It's very important to acclimate the fish slowly to your water to avoid shock. If you don't, death or disease is certain to occur. And we're going to stop there today. I thank you for being with me. This is going to be Series 3 on For the Beginner. Thank you for joining me. This is Susan for SLC Aquatics. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've benefited from some of the information that I've shared with you today. And in the description below, I will put the link to this article so you yourself can print it off or go back and refer to it as often as you need to. Have a great day. Susan for SLC Aquatics. Love you.